Hi, everybody, and welcome back to this track. We've got a super exciting talk for you with a really great speaker. Apologies, it's towards the end of the day and I'm a little bit tired. We have Josh Lamar for you all with Redesigning Inclusion, Moving Towards Belonging. So give me a second while I welcome Josh onto stage. Take your time, get your camera and mic ready, Josh. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, thank you. Doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Excited
Good.
to get some grub in a little bit, but also more excited to see your talk. Um, so I'll leave you to it, and I'll see you back for the Q&A. Enjoy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. My name is Josh Lamar. I use he, him pronouns, and I am wearing my signature black t-shirt. What you cannot see is that actually it looks like there's a Space Invader on it, but it's actually an electronic music label of a little ghost. So I'm just going to pan down for a second. There's my nerdy electronic music t-shirt. I'm here at my apartment in Paris, where I live. But if you hear my accent, it's Californian. So that's kind of where a little bit more about me. I also want to just mention at the beginning that on the resources tab, I have links to a few things, including this presentation, where to connect with me on LinkedIn, and where to download the report that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation, which has tons of resources and articles and recommendations that can help you. So this talk is entitled Redesigning Inclusion. And the idea is really this idea of how we can evolve and design and redesign and continue evolving the process of how we build inclusive products. I'm going to be starting to share with how my perspective has evolved over time and kind of where I'm coming from. Then I'm going to talk about some fundamental shifts of how the big shifts that I've been seeing over the last 5 years or so. And then I'm going to talk about why invest in inclusive design. And it might sound weird that this is actually in the part 3 of the presentation, but it will make sense because I'm going to focus the second half of the presentation on how to really impact change. And the answer might surprise you. So that's why I'm letting the secret sit there for a moment. So to talk a little bit more about my perspective, I started my company Amplinate and co-founded it with my husband. You can see him kind of in the third from the left in the image here, Marcelo. He's Italian Brazilian. The resources tab is on the right, and it looks like it's a paper icon. And if you don't have your chat, and it's in the same menu as the chat that shows up. So hopefully you can find it there. So I founded my company with my husband, and my goal in founding my company was actually to build the most diverse company possible and really celebrate and amplify lives and worldviews and voices of people from all around the world. And as we grew as a company, we also started growing our team globally. And so we do international and cross-cultural research, and we have teams across the world. I'm in Paris, we have a team in Brazil, another team in the Philippines, and we also have a team in the USA, several in Seattle. So over the years, we've been doing international and cross-cultural research, but then also my experience is coming from the type of work that we do. So part of being a queer co-founder of a company means that I get to work with other queer clients, which is amazing because we get to do topics of research on very DEI related things such as social exclusion, accessibility, abuse, privacy and security, accommodations at work, seeking help, and health and wellness. And then we've also, over the time that I've had my company, and we've been around for about 4 years now, we've been doing research with very diverse groups of humans around the world, including neurodiverse humans, disabled humans. We've been looking at gender and sexuality, cultural identity, economic status, religion, age. And so these two foundations kind of come together to inform both the topic as well as the group that we've been looking at in the research that we do with our clients. And then the last piece of how we kind of evolved as a company and how my perspective has changed over the years has been building this report called Reframing Diversity and Inclusive Design. And that's the report that is in the resources tab, as well as a download for this presentation so that you can download it. I'm not going to go into all of the things in this report, but I'm going to be touching on some of the key themes that have come up. So let's start by looking at fundamental shifts. And I am subtitling this Acknowledging Difference and Accountability, because difference and accountability are really two of the key themes here. Because importantly, we want to ensure that not only are we're not ignoring that we're different and that there are differences out there. And it's really important that we just decide to acknowledge that differences exist and systemic racism exists. And as soon as we can start acknowledging these things, then we can become more accountable. So there's this idea that we always talked about in the USA of how the USA is a melting pot, that we all have all of these different backgrounds and cultures, and we all come together and we become American. And somehow we lose that cultural identity. And we can imagine the same kind of melting potness with other identities as well. And this idea that we somehow meld together isn't really fair, because the better image that I want to have and continue promoting is this idea of the mosaic, that we are different and we are different next to each other, and we exist in the same spaces together. And how can we start existing acknowledging our differences? Because we're always going to find differences when we look for them, and that's special and amazing. And so it's not that we meld and lose our identities, it's that we become stronger and more clearer in who we are. And that identity is often multifaceted and intersectional. It's really easy to put people in boxes and say, like, this is the one thing that you are. Like, I am queer, but I'm also a male, and I'm also white skinned, and I also have the cultural background that I have. I live in Paris because part of my family history was French, and I really wanted to come back here. And some of these multifaceted and intersectional identities are coming from positions of power, and some of them are not. Some of them are from places of strong privilege. And again, it's important to acknowledge that when we have these positions, to acknowledge these are my positions of privilege, and these are other positions that are not from a place of privilege. And it's in this way that we start to, instead of judging people by what we see, because you can't see diversity. Diversity is something that you can, the viewer can see someone else and judge, but it's not really about that, because seeing another person and judging who they are is actually reinforcing our biases. And it's better to let others show you who they are, letting them be open and to share with you who they are and how they would like you to interact with them. And that's a part that has really, I think, been shifting, and it's important to acknowledge here as well. We don't see the diversity, we see our own biases and judgments. But when we allow others to really show who they are, we're able to have a more authentic communication and interaction together. And as I mentioned already, it's the idea of just moving beyond the boxes and the false binaries, because as we become more and more complex and intersectional in our identities, it's important to acknowledge that it's not this or that. And usually if there's a binary out there, it's not everything. And it's important that we say, you know what, that is a box, and let's take the box away and just explore and acknowledge our complexities, because humans are complex and humans are dynamic. And just like culture is dynamic, we shift, we change, we evolve with time, and we evolve contextually as well. Where I might react one way in one situation, I'm going to be different in another. And as we are designing products with diverse humans in mind, it's really important to acknowledge when we are taking our own biases and cognitive biases and applying them to other people, and when we are actually allowing them to be a part of the process. And there's a shift I'd like to say from empathy to compassion. And in the sense that I was always told, like, when you're doing research, you're and doing design, your goal is to be empathetic to the user. And there are situations and people and identities and experiences in this world, lived experiences that I'm never going to have. As a cisgendered male, I'm never going to know what it's like to be a woman. I'm never going to know what it's like to give birth. I'm never going to know what it's like to be a Black or brown person. But I am a queer person. I'm not going to know what it's like to be straight. That would be a really interesting one. And so acknowledging that these are the experiences that I can have, but there are other people's experiences that I'm not going to have. And so it's not actually about empathy. I can't put myself in their shoes, but I can have compassion. And compassion is taking action. Compassion is saying, what is it that I can do within my power from whatever role that I have in whatever company that I'm at? What is it that I can do that will actually help make this experience better? Because if you've come across a negative experience that someone has, what can you do to make that experience better? And in the same way, apathy, not caring about other people, not caring about improving the experiences of people, moves to accountability. It's saying, this is what I'm accountable for. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And involving all of those other people in the process allows us to make positive experiences and create positive change. And the question, who might be unintentionally excluded, has a couple layers here. Because as we are in the process of designing and developing products, it's important to ask who's not in the room, whose voices are not being heard in this in the design and development of this product. And also there's this sense of not excluding people. The goal is to include everyone, but sometimes I hear people get very worried about where to start. And the place to start is, let's try not excluding people and making sure everyone feels like they're not excluded, and then we bring them into inclusion. And it's a journey over time that we make. As we start bringing people in and thinking more globally, we're actually more of the global community that we want to have. That instead of thinking about everything from our own ethnocentric lens, that as we start thinking globally, we have I that becomes we and a mind becomes ours. Because as we're growing and building products internationally, it doesn't exist only in one market, only in one frame of reference, only in one mental model. We have to start thinking about how people all around the world are using products. And that means that we have to start thinking globally, because we are going to be using products differently than I might use it. And it's important to listen to all of these different types of voices. And I'm going to only say the what if once. And I think, what if we could actually move from systemic racism to systemic belonging? What would that actually look like? Because again, acknowledging the difference that there is systemic racism is the first part. And as we continue to have conversations and learn, and we seek common ground and we build bridges to people that are different than us, what would it be like if systemically we could actually create a sense of belonging so that everyone could use products and technology that made them feel like they belonged? For me, that's the goal. So I want to briefly talk about ethical and business justifications. Because what we've been talking about so far is really in the realm of ethics, that everyone has the right to technology that treats us equitably. And that's very important. And that's probably why many of you are here. That's the reason that I'm here, because I want to create technology that everyone can use, that everyone is treated equitably. And that's really important. And maybe that's your why. But this isn't always the reason that your customers or your companies are going to do what they want to do. There's actually also a business justification. And the business justification for much of what we're doing here with inclusive design is actually that the more customers you can get, the larger market share you're going to have. and the more money you're going to be able to make. And the business needs to make money in order to continue existing. And if you have a job at a corporation, so you can continue having a job. And this is an unfortunate and really true reality about it. But it can come from the ethical place. And that's the really great reason to start. But then from there, in order to really start impacting change, it's important to acknowledge the business reality. Another example of business justification is that inclusive design fosters product innovation. The more that we learn about diverse users who could be using your product and maybe aren't, the more we can actually innovate and build a product that appeals to more people. Again, more people, more money. In grad school, we were always taught get a random sampling and design for the average. If you were doing research, you get it 10 people. Maybe there's one queer person in that whole 10-person sample. And then if there's any finding that comes up where that person feels excluded, it's like, oh, but that was just one person. And I think that one of the big shifts that's happening is that we can actually start designing for the long tail. That means choosing a niche audience and really digging in and learning what is it that I can do differently that's going to solve the problems that this niche audience has in the long tail, and then apply to everybody. So I want to now get into how we're going to impact change, because we are in this together. And when I say we, I mean all of us, but I also mean us and the business people. And this is actually where I'm going. And I'm going to be sharing with you a framework that we've been developing internally at Amplinate in order to make sure that we're actually helping our customers impact business value so that the things that they want to do to make their products better for the reason of equitable technology for all is actually business justified. So we started off with this idea of scorecarding as a way to facilitate conversations. So we've taken our expertise in research with diverse, marginalized, and underrepresented humans. We've added our own perspectives as a team, as well as desk research on how we have been looking at ways that other people are measuring inclusivity as well as ROI. And we put this together into a scorecard to look at how this can work. And if you download the report in the it's called Reframing Diversity report, it talks about these 3 layers of inclusive design. There's the product, which we think of as the outer layer, and there's the research that you do with diverse humans that support the inclusivity of the product that you're building. But deeper than that, there's actually the process that, and this is the systemic layer, where there's a process where you gather feedback and learn about your product over time and listen to what problems are coming up. And then there's actually the people, there's your team, and deepest, there's actually you yourself, because it is really our responsibility as humans to learn as much as we can, educate ourselves, and be there to advocate for others. Now, we took all of this perspective, as well as the last several years of looking at these different groups and audiences and topics, and we found there are 5 dimensions that really support all inclusive experiences. There's access and equity, trust and safety, choice and control, empathy and belonging, and awareness and education. And you can take each of these 5 dimensions and start measuring them, but they're actually measured orthogonally to the product, the process, and the team that's building it. And so we've actually created this very large scorecard, and this is part of what it looks like here. And yes, it is too small to read on the screen. That is more to show you kind of this is the summary, but you can take an aspect of product, process, and team, but you can look at it in terms of choice and control, or you can look at it in terms of access and equity. And each one of those things can be measured differently. And it creates a holistic perspective of your product. Now, I'm going to go into business strategy here really quick, and this is going to be fun. So imagine there's a 2x2 where you have high business impact on the top and obviously low on the bottom, and then high ethical impact on the right, and then maybe low ethical impact on the left. Now, typically, the features that get built on teams are things that are going to have high business impact. They're going to cause more people to use your product, And they're going to also, and actually I'm gonna move this over slightly. There's 3 ways to grow your business. You can actually increase repeat purchases, increase your pricing, and sell to more people. And so the goal here is actually understanding what are the things that can actually cause your customers to stay using your product. If you have a product that is inclusive, more people will continue using it because they don't feel excluded. If you have a product that appeals to more people, that can appeal to marginalized populations as well as the average population, you're going to have more potential for audience growth. And so if you plot these factors, you can actually look for features that you can build that are going to have high ethical impact. They're going to be good for humanity, but also have high business impact. And that's really the goal here, is to identify those features that are going to do both, because then you have a business justification for building the features that you want to build ethically because they're going to be good for humans. So the way that this works is you start with the assessment, and on our Amplinate homepage, there's actually a short version of the assessment, but we have a much longer version that we use with our clients. But once you take the assessment, and the goal is actually to look at it across an entire team of people that is building the product that you're working on. And this product could also be a service, or it could also be something else. It's really taking the team that's building whatever it is that you're building, and then using the assessment, the scorecard, to identify knowledge gaps and essentially what you know and don't know. And if you have a gap of something that you don't know, and then we actually workshop that discussion in order to really prioritize the opportunities for business impact, plotting them onto the graph so that we can see which ones are going to be the most impactful. And that is how to start making sense of the process and also impacting the change for the good that you want to see. And the journey is really the destination here. This is something that does take time, but it's something that you just build into your processes, and you learn over time. You pick a group that you think is going to be the most impacted or that isn't represented, and you make sure that you do that work, do the research, understand their perspective, involve them in participatory design to ensure that your process creates an inclusive product more and more with time. So I want to say thank you, and we have some time for Q&A. Again, all of the resources are in the resources tab, including this presentation, and as well as linked in this deck.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that presentation, Josh. That was
Thank
great.
you.
We don't have any questions as of yet, but we still have some time. So if anybody wants to put some questions in the chat now, feel free. But I think people are a little bit shy. So Josh, do you have any sort of final thoughts or something that you really want to get across to your audience before we sort of round out?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is really consider the business implications of how to speak ROI to your product team, because they are the ones that are going to get built, because there's this imaginary cut line of things that are really important, and then there's also a bunch of other things that sometimes get deprioritized. And I've seen, and unfortunately, a lot of times the inclusive features get deprioritized. And so in order to build a better business case, this is a framework that you can use to really apply that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I was totally wrong, because we do have a question.
Okay, excellent.
So what do you think Move Closer, so a little bit of a mess up there, so sorry, I'm dyslexic, so I have to read it verbatim, to see each other fully, adding more specific labels for everyone to define themselves, or work towards eliminating labels and just letting people be? I know this is not possible today, but in the future. That's a really good question.
Such a good question. I think it depends on what the purpose is. So let me give you an example. When I was a hiring manager at a tech company, it was Microsoft, we'd often get resumes that would be like, here's a bunch of potentials, and here's a diverse candidate. It's like, well, what does that mean? And it typically at the time, meant a woman or a Black or brown person. But there's so many ways to look at diversity differently. And when I've seen other examples of hiring, it takes out like everything, like your name, your gender, your language that you speak, and where you're coming from in the world. And I think that in that case, those are things that are actually the most interesting, because when I hire people, I look for the difference. I want to find them, again, I said this before, I want to find the most diverse team. I want to build the most diverse company on the planet, because it's what makes us different that makes us special. And I think that in that case, it's actually the the labels and the complexity and the diversity is more interesting. But then in other times, eliminating everything can allow for a more equitable experience. And so I think that the question becomes, what are you going to use it for? And is this a tool to discriminate against people, or is this a way to be inclusive for people? Because the goal should always be to be open and inclusive, and to really celebrate the diversity and not to use it for discrimination.
Great answer. So those are all the questions we have. So I don't know if you have any sort of final thoughts, or anything you really wanted to put across before we end the session. The person just said thank you.
Ah,
And
you're
somebody else
welcome.
said and somebody else said some really good points made. Thanks, Josh. So I think people really
Excellent.
enjoyed the session. So any parting words, Josh?
I think my parting words are going to be, play around with how you have the conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion in your companies, and the way to facilitate the conversation is to start it. And don't feel like you have to do everything. There's no boiling the ocean. It's really start somewhere, learn something, and and go there. Oh, I see another question. How do I teach young designers? Well, again, actually it's another great question. I would say start doing something. And the way that we start is to do it wrong, do it messy, because we're humans. And the thing is that if we learn a little bit, then we can dig in more. And sometimes it's about getting a broader sampling of lots of people just to see, like, is there anything interesting here? Oh, this came up, but it was one person. Let's dig in. And then you evolve and you grow on a journey of learning. And I think that that's the best place to start. If you have more questions, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to answer more of your questions and just talk about this some more, because I want to actually connect inclusive design and the business in such a way that we get more of these features actually built.
Yeah, 100%. One of my mottos is failure as a teacher. So I think that's definitely a poignant point to make.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. I really appreciate you joining us again. Josh joins us a lot here at Tech Circus. They're definitely a friend of the company. So please do connect with them. And thank you so much for joining us for the What If Summit, Josh.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.